Hi, everybody. So glad we're back together again. It's time again for Miss Peggy's story time, and we're doing chapters 9 and 10, The Tanglewoods Secret. I hope you're enjoying so far. Did you enjoy the part last night about Ruth running away and having to hide? Well, she didn't have to. She could have gone home and apologized, could she? But she didn't. She was stubborn. She was going to have her own way, and she ended up spending the night herself. After I read that probably church found herself in. They were mostly photographs and not very interesting, but there was one that I liked so much that I pulled my chair over so that I could have a good look at it. I have the head. It hovers a fierce burster's office. It's a very famous one down there, and he can't get back up, and he dare not go further down, and he's just helpless there until the shepherd comes to. He stood in front of me with a tremendous manly. He sat down on the sofa while he seemed really interested. But when I finished, I was straight home just yet, for I thought that my new friend was one of the nicest men I had ever met, except for maybe Mr. Tandy, the old shepherd. That my new friend was one of the nicest men I had ever met, except for maybe Mr. Tandy, the old shepherd. So once again, I found myself staring at that picture on the wall. "Isn't that a nice picture?" I remarked. The shepherd at home. One of his lambs escaped, like that one, to look for it, just to get it out, and his hands got all scratched to bits by the thorns. My friend was looking at the picture too, full of grass to eat. One sharp cliff going straight down there by myself. There's only one person who can take me home, and that. So he opened his mouth and gave a little cry, and the shepherd has been waiting all night for that little cry. As soon as he hears it, he leans over and picks up the lamb and carries it safely back to his own pasture. And I don't know who's happy, but he lifted the lamb out of the thorns without hurting it at all. And just in the same way, the good shepherd was wounded and hurt when he came to look for you. He has done everything. And what you do is say, "Thank you." The good shepherd was wounded and hurt when he came to look for you. He has done everything. And what you do is say thank you and believe that his wounded hands can lift you up and carry you back to God's fold when you ask him. "And what happens then?" I asked. "Shall I always be good after that?" He smiled. "You won't always be good at once," he replied, "but you will always belong to the good shepherd, and he will begin to teach you how to be good. He will often speak to you in your heart, and you must learn to listen to his voice. When he speaks to you, you must always obey. And you must learn to talk to him about everything, too. We call it praying, but it really means sharing everything with the Good Shepherd." Once more, we sat for a long time, and at last the minister spoke. "I have to go over to my church now," he said gently, "and you must go home, or your aunt will think that you've run away somewhere else. But before you go, I'm going to give you a copy of that picture for yourself. Take it with you and look at it often. And every time you look at it, remember that you are the lost lamb, and that the Good Shepherd is waiting for you to find you as soon as you ask him. One other thing. Do you have a Bible of your own?" I said that I am. "Find the Gospel of Luke and read a little bit in it every night. It will tell you the story of the shepherd and how he came to earth to look for lost sheep. And when you've finished it, you read the other Gospels." He opened a drawer and pulled out a postcard-sized copy of the picture on the wall. I took it with shining eyes and whispered my thanks. I followed him out, holding my new. When I got about 100 yards, I turned around and ran back. I stood on tiptoe and pulled him down so that I could whisper in his ear. "Shall I come and tell you when it's happened?" I whispered. He nodded. "I was hoping you would. I shall always be glad to see you." So Yankum slipped in and out among the trees until I reached a little clearing away from any path. The moss was thick on the ground, and there were vines hanging in curtains all around me. Here I knelt down and felt though I was in some secret chapel far away from the world. I looked again at my picture, but at first I dared not pray. I felt as if my whole life was going to depend on the next few minutes. What if I spoke and nothing happened? What if the Good Shepherd had gone away and wasn't listening anymore? Then I spoke aloud to the Good Shepherd. I told him about all my naughtiness and how I couldn't be good by myself. I told him I was sorry because I kept him waiting so long. I asked him to forgive me and to find me and to pick me up in his arms and never let me run away from him again. I waited perfectly still for my answer, almost expecting to feel his gentle arms around me. And what happened? I felt nothing. I heard nothing. But I knew that my prayer had been heard. I couldn't possibly have put it into words, but I knew that love and forgiveness were all around me, as certain as the sunlight and the quiet air. I knew in that instant sought and loved and found. I was so happy that I stayed there where I was for a while, as though by moving I might break the spell. I wasn't only happy, I was grateful too. I remembered how long the Lord Jesus had waited for me, and I thought of Mr. Tandy's poor bleeding hands, and remember how the hands of the shepherd had been wounded when he died on the cross for me. I didn't understand it all, but the minister had said that the Bible made it very plain, and I believed him, so I folded my hands again and tried to thank Jesus. But then it suddenly struck me that I was supposed to be going home and my aunt would be waiting for me. So I left my little outdoor church and went back to the road. But I walked slowly. Would they be very angry with me? But worst of all, would I be naughty and rude again? My rudeness seemed to come out whether I wanted it or not. If I was naughty now, everything would be spoiled. But then I remembered something else. The shepherd had picked me up in his arms, and I could tell him everything, if he was really as close to me as all that. So I told him about it as I trotted home, and somehow all my together in the hall. I had nothing happened to my hard little heart that I had not expected. I suddenly ran forward and flung myself into my auntie's arms. "I'm sorry, Auntie," I whispered. "I'll try to be good. Please, please don't send me to that boarding school. I want to stay with you here, and I'll never, ever run away or be naughty again." My aunt, kneeling, pressed my tear-stained cheek against hers and held me close to her. And then she smoothed back my tangled hair and kissed me. "My poor little girl," she whispered back, "I don't want to send you away if I can possibly help it. We'll try again." Then she took my hand and led me to the table in the kitchen, where I sat down and ate a whole second breakfast to make up for the supper that I had missed the night before. And that's the end of our reading for tonight. I'm so glad we got to that chapter, aren't you? Poor Ruth has been struggling to be good by herself, and it just hasn't worked.